Hello, everyone. Welcome to Opinions New by Dr. Frank Tianshui. I'm Frank. In this episode, I want to talk to you about an issue, a question. That is, why does Chinese Communist Party continue to give away money to African countries? While China in itself is in trouble of making more, money or gaining some foreign exchange reserve. It really is badly needs. Okay? Not too long ago, on June the 17th, Chinese government made an announcement under the so-called the stipulation or the spirit of China Africa Forum, as goodwill, a show of goodwill, and China is forgiving the about 187 billion US dollars worth of loans, free loans or assistance or other program that China has been helping the African countries to do, helping or investing or lending to African countries. And then in a nutshell, China is really giving up on or forgiving on 187 billion US dollars. That's about 1.3 trillion Chinese dollars. And considering that China is still a developing country, per capita income is not that high in China, maybe around 3,000 Chinese dollars RMB, or only about $600 US dollars per month, per person income. Why would China give billions of dollars away to those African countries? And why does China forgive those debts or loans they had? Right? And this has been going on for decades. I remember back in I believe it was in the 70s. In China, I was in high school, I believe, either middle school or high school, right? And we were listening to the radio or watching the TVs and reading newspapers in China about this China assisting or assisting Tanzania or Zambia in building a railroad between the two countries. What the heck is that? Why is China still a developing country? China was still building its own railroad, and many of the people, were living under poverty. And why would China spend so much money and effort in building a railroad between two African countries? And why just these two African countries? Right? The government never told us why. They never revealed its true intention. And we just read about the news, heard about this so-called China-Africa friendship programs like that. Okay? And then, okay, of course, only later on, maybe decades later, when we look back, we realize that railroad, is no longer in service. I heard it's no longer in service, not usable. The African countries of Tanzania and Zambia did not have the money or resource or the budget to upkeep the railroad, and also the railroad probably lost its purpose. And what's the true intention of China helping to build the railroad? Because there was a copper in one of the two countries, right? There was a copper mine there, and China needs the copper. And then they need to build a railroad to move the copper from inland to seaport and then transport back to China. That is why. I'm not saying that China shouldn't invest in a railroad or a copper mine in an African country. You can do that. It's a legitimate, business operation, and you make money, you invest, you make money, get what you need, you pay for what you get, and that's fair, that's normal, right? But don't pretend it's just under a friendship program, making it sounding like a charity or something, to African people. And that's why, even though China has invested so much in African countries over the years, over the decades, and China is now really building a good reputation among African people. We have seen that the African countries, African people, view China as a new colonial power, as bad as those Western colonial power, or worse than that. Because at least the white people, the Western countries, the colonialists, at least instilled, brought to Africa some good democratic system or something, a new technology. What China did, China brought to Africa was just the greed of Chinese style, right? So no wonder they didn't like that. They didn't like the Chinese expansion in Africa. Okay? But why is China investing or lending or assisting so much to those African countries? Okay? And one reason is that China or Chinese Communist regime tries to show that we're big, we're number one in the world, number two in the world already, with GDP, and we are making up. We're growing, we're bigger, we're stronger, we're a great country. They want to show off. That's one reason. But that, the number two GDP, I still question on that. I question that. I doubt it. That's the true number, because the Communist government of China has a good reputation, or so-called reputation, has been known for fabricating, cheating on their numbers, statistics. The communist leaders themselves, the leadership themselves, they don't even believe that. Remember Premier Li Keqiang, the current premier. He's from he and I. We are alma mater. We have share the same alma mater. We are alums, basically, from Peking University in Beijing, China. When Li was the party chief or the governor of Liaoning province in northeast of China, he openly admitted this to U.S. and then U.S. ambassador to China, that he didn't even trust the economic statistics of the province that he was in charge of, that he's the head of. And he said, I don't believe in those numbers. They're not trustworthy. They made it up. It's fake. These are fake numbers. He instead, as a ruler, or he didn't need the numbers, so he needed data to validate or to make his decision. So he relied on three things. I think one is the power generation. How much power is generated, used in the province. And second is the transportation. How many train loads of things are being used in that province. And the third one is, I think, is one the power generation and usage, transportation. And third one, I forgot which one was the first one. Anyway, but he relied on some hardcore numbers. That's not easy. It's hard to fabricate or to falsify. He relied on those numbers to estimate and the total gross domestic product for his province. Think about that. He's the Communist Party leader, or he's in charge of the whole province, like a governor of a U.S. state, and he does not even know the true GDP number of his province. He had to rely on things like power generation or transportation and other cold hard numbers to make his decision. And he admitted this to then U.S. ambassador to China in person. How wonderful, right? And now he's not just in charge of the province, but now in charge of He's the premier of China now. So I don't believe that the number is true. The U.S., China being the number two, country in the world with regard to economy. But anyway, that's a different issue. Back to this topic here, China wants to use this foreign assistance aids to Africa as a way to show off its strength, its new economic status, world number two status. That's one, right? And second reason, I think, is because China wants to bribe those African countries, right? They want to buy out those countries, the leaders of those African countries, developing countries, right? Why? Because China needs the support of those countries in international forums, in international organizations, United Nations, and all those organizations like WTO, WHO, under the United Nations, and especially UN Human Rights Organization, Human Rights Organization. Why? Because China failed alone. Because China is a communist authoritarian regime, and it was a really, really bad human rights record. And yet China was able to to buy out all those African countries and put himself in a seat on the UN Human Rights Council, right? And they even actually worked so hard, making so many, human rights, violating countries, into the Human Rights Council and under UN, and kicked U.S. out of that. And that's why I think it's wise, it's correct for U.S. government to pull out from the UN Human Rights, agency. When it's full of violators of human rights. Why what can you do with them? Okay? And so that's one reason China invested, lended, and assisted so much to those African countries. China built the Asian, I think it's called African Congress Center. They donated a lot of money, and they probably build a lot of eavesdropping, devices in there as well. Right? And also, China built so many, many, bridges, railroads, roads, reservoirs, hospitals, those infrastructures in African countries. Hope of buying them out, influencing them, getting them to support China in UN forums. Right? And one way they did that was to provide scholarship to the sons and daughters of those African dictators. Yeah. You heard about the country, a city called Guangzhou, right? Guangzhou Canton, or Canton, Guangdong Province, across from Hong Kong. Right? There's a huge population of African. We don't want to call it African Chinese or black Africans, let's say, in China. The huge population there. A lot of them were students from Africa studying in China, and the full scholarship provided by the Chinese government, because they want to buy out the sons and daughters of those leaders, dictators in Africa. Right? So they are the sons and daughters, the second generation of the elite. They were given the scholarship, but those sons and daughters, they're not that grateful. Seems to be, they knew that their parents were bought by the Chinese communists, right? The Chinese government, and Chinese government paid them for this, give them all those benefits because they had something, in return. They had the need. They demanded. They need the support of their parents, who are in power in African countries. So, and lots of those people, for African students, upon graduation from Chinese university, did not want to go back to Africa. Of course, they felt that in China, the standard of living is better, especially in some good cities, especially when they are given so much money. Right? So they don't want to go back. So that's why there's a huge population of African students or graduates in Canton, in Guangzhou, and Guangdong. Together with the increase in the population was the AIDS epidemic. Yeah. Lots of people, those people had AIDS, and they spread this to girls in China. But that's another issue. Okay. So the thing is, there was an estimated that 40% of the money that China lends or assisted invested in Africa ended up in the hands of the private hands of the dictators. That's sad, right? Because in those countries, there's not really good legal system or justice system. The government, the operation was not transparent. A lot of dictatorship there. Of course, they can to pocket the money. Okay? So basically, this is what was happening. The Chinese communist dictators took the money from the people of China and gave that to African countries in name of helping those countries, but money ended up in the dictators of African countries. Eastern dictators to African dictators. Okay, that's what's happening. Right now, the problem is those monies that China invested or lended to those countries, they're now really well kept, well now really managed. The loans, the programs, a lot of the bribery, misuse, what outright, embezzlement, you name it, right? So the money were not well spent. The kind of project was not well run. Right? Now what happened then is that they default on the loans, default on the loans, and now the Chinese government found that they could not get the money back. So what they do? They say, hey, forgive the debt, give you a free for all. That's what's happening now. Hundreds of billions of US dollars worth of loans were forgiven. But those people, they're not really that grateful. They got the loan forgiveness. They feel that they didn't get enough. They probably wanted more because they asked for more and did not get enough. Right? They're greedy too. Right? And they're bad, they're dictators, and they're greedy, and they want more. And if they couldn't get enough from China, this is going to backfire, and they can to be to look ugly. One country is Nigeria. Right? This country has received so much money from China, a lot of aid and loans, but they're not happy, and that's why many people in China feel outraged. They feel anger about this country. Why? Because of this Wuhan pandemic. Right? African countries are affected. Nigeria is one of them. Right? They lost a lot of people, a lot of lives, cost the country lots of money. Right? Now, even though they just received a big sum of money, good loans from China, and that loan was forgiven, and there I guess that's not enough to them. And Nigeria was the first country to sue the Chinese government for its loss in this pandemic. Seems interesting, huh? Right. So basically, why does China give so much money to African countries, right? Or the giveaways? Is because they want to buy influence. They want to buy votes in UN, United Nations, and other forums. And then also, they want to pass money to the dictators, to the and why do they steal? Even though now China is suffering from this economic breakdown, from pandemic, and also from U.S.-China trade war, China is really exhausting its foreign currencies, uh, foreign exchanges, foreign exchange reserves in its bank. Right? China is struggling. China is limiting its citizens exchanging foreign currencies. Now, can they stop the giveaway, the free giveaway? They probably try. They probably want to, but it's hard for them to do so because those dictators, or those people, those countries, they are not that easily be off the hook. You know, that's a dilemma the Chinese government has to face. So as long as Chinese communists in power, that's going to be a burden to the people of China, at least for now. Right? Okay, that's all I have for this episode of Opinions New by Frank. Thank you. I will see you or talk to you next time.